What's poppin', people? Welcome on back. Today we're going to be covering elestrals, specifically the Earth Nexus Beatdown deck, and how it's going to stay competitively viable post the bans and restrictions. Earth Nexus got hit really hard with the most recent banning and restrictions. More so restrictions because Drataya isn't played in Earth Nexus, but that's besides the point. Laurel, Earthquake, and Lavalith all getting knocked down from 3 copies to 1 is detrimental to this deck. I think the build that I have right now is still somewhat competitively viable. It worked wonders at my locals this past weekend. I ended up coming in first place, winning every set, and only losing 1 game in one of those sets. So almost went unscathed. It pretty much was a steamroll for the majority of the time. The deck that we're going to be going over today is based off of the deck that the Elestronauts posted about 2 weeks ago. Their list was pre-ban, pre-restriction. So the modifications that I made are the things that I found necessary after the restrictions took place. Before we get into the deck, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is a brand new adventure for me. I'm very excited to delve into the world of elestrals and just TCG in general. So if you guys are excited, hopefully you stick around. Let's get into the deck list, shall we? All right, let's go ahead and get into the main deck. Then we'll talk spirits, then we'll talk sideboard. First up, we have the elestrals. We're going to start off with 3 copies of Viscerous. Now this is going to be your powerhouse, essentially. These are going to be the main beaters of the deck. The more you play it, the stronger they get. They'll overwhelm your opponents, get over their elestrals, deal direct damage, so on and so forth. Next up, we have Equilinks. We're going to have 3 copies. This is going to be your Nexus engine, so this is going to be the central focus point of moving around your spirits and causing different triggers to happen. So with this card specifically, it destroys target runes whenever you Nexus, so it'll keep your opponent in check, it'll prevent them from ramping, it'll stop them from countering things that you do, so on and so forth. Next up, and this is where I changed the format a little bit post-restriction, I added 3 copies of Pandicine. Pandicine is going to be vital now. It's essential. I mean, initially with the build pre-nerf, I think I had 1 or 2 in sideboard just in case. I'm running 3 main deck now. There's no other way about it. You have to. The card is essential now. With getting back any Earthquake that you may use, Laurel that you may use, this will give you the ability to use it more than once. You'll be able to use Earthquake, let's use Earthquake as an example, up to 4 times if you play it right, which is really good. You can also use it to get back Ambrosia, which is good long term. You'll be able to heal more, do more, play longer, so on and so forth. So it's pretty vital now. Next up, we have 2 copies of Mudlet. Now, Mudlet, I think in the original deck list, had 3 copies. I knocked it down to 2. It's not... I like it. It works. It does certain things, especially when you pair it with Equilinks. You can constantly switch your opponent back and forth between attack and defense position if you need to, but I don't think it's vital enough to have 3 copies. I felt like when I was playing with 3 copies, they sat in my hand, and I don't necessarily like that. I would rather draw into other things and not have things just sit in my hand for the sake of them being there. They come in handy, don't get me wrong, they do their work, but for the most part, it just felt like it didn't have to be there as often as it was, if that makes sense. For the same reason, the next card, Mustation, I knocked that down to 1. I think that the original deck list had either 2 or 3. Yeah, 1 is enough for me. It does the work when it needs to, but I really don't like it sitting in my hand when I could have the draw power of drawing something else, whether that's a PTA, a Gorgon's Gaze, or whatever, which we'll get into that later. Now, moving away from the Earth Elestrals, we're going to have 3 copies of Astrabbit, which is pretty standard. I feel like most decks run 3 Astrabbit. It's going to be your draw engine. It's going to be a way to shuffle your deck if you're getting bad draws. It's pretty good. And then next up, we have 2 copies of Boombat. Now, this is going to essentially be your new Earthquake. So, on top of having Earthquake and being able to do it 4 times maximum with Pandicine, you get 2 more with Boombat. Now, I've been debating on upping it to 3 copies, but I don't want to overwhelm it. It does its job right now. 2 seems to be the sweet spot, so I'm going to keep it there. And then the last one for Elestrals is going to be an Elechick, just a 1-drop of an Elechick, and maybe I can put it somewhere on screen where it isn't going to be completely covered up by the light. We'll do that. Okay, so we have 1 Elechick, and it's basically just to search out the Demeter, or whatever divine rune you want to run, but in this case, it's Demeter. So now that we covered that, let's go ahead and talk about the invoke runes, the stadiums, so on and so forth. So to kick it off, we're going to just do the stadium really quick because it's a one and done type thing. We have 1 copy of Foloi Forest. That's it. I really only run it so that I can counter an opponent's stadium. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I should run 2, but for now, I feel like 1 copy is enough. I don't want them to be stuck in my hand, and I really only see the need to play them if I need to stop my opponent from doing something. If they're nice, don't get me wrong, it does make your Elestrals stronger as long as they're Earth Enchanted in this deck, which they all will be. Yeah, I feel like it isn't a necessity. I don't think it's needed in the sense where of like more than one copy. I really only found the need to play it if I was shutting down a different stadium that was already in play. So as long as it gets in the way of the opponents doing what they want to do, I like it. Other than that, it isn't a necessity, and I don't really find the need to have more than one. All right, next up we have the staples for this deck and for most decks. One copy of Earthquake, one copy of Laurels. I don't really think I need to explain them, but I will. You just destroy a target Elestral. That's all they do. I mean, resting on your Laurels has a little bit more of a caveat to it. It's a little bit more situation based. Earthquake you can pop whenever, but resting on your Laurels is more so like if you're in a pinch and you're on the low and you need to balance the board a little bit. But Earthquake, for an example, is just, you know, you use it whenever it blows up a target Elestral and you move on. And that's the main key of the deck and why we run 3 Pandicine. Next up, we have 3 copies of Ambrosia. This is going to be your healing engine. You're going to be able to recover or resurge spirits whenever you use them. And if you use Pandicine for this, you can do it more than 3 times, which is great. You can do it up to 6 times. And then last but not least, for the Invokes, Divines, Stadiums, so on and so forth, we have 2 copies of Demeter. This card is pretty straightforward. You use it to Nexus off of. You don't necessarily use it for her ability of giving +3/+3. You can. It's really nice in a pinch, and I did have to use it a couple times, but for the most part, it's just so you have spirits on field that you can Nexus away from. And that's pretty much it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pivot into the counter runes. All right, kicking off the counter runes, we have, again, just some staples. We've got 3 copies of Poison Tipped Arrows, 3 copies of Gorgon's Gaze, and then 3 copies, just kidding, 2 copies of Shield of Achilles. I said 3 copies because I'm debating on bumping it up to 3, but for now, I'm at 2. It's the sweet spot that I like. I don't know what I would pivot out for a 3rd one, but these are just going to be your, counters, your stops, your prevention, your stuff like that. So they play something you don't like, PTA it dies. Gorgon's Gaze stops triggers, it stops battle, it stops all that kind of stuff. Shield of Achilles, if they throw their big boss Elestral at you and you don't like it, flip the Achilles, it goes back in their hand. They're going to have a hard time playing it again, hopefully. Following that, we've got 3 Altar of Stars. Now, this is going to be pretty essential in this deck specifically, just because it's a Nexus deck, so it does do its thing, it helps, it does all that good stuff, and it really does come in, it comes in handy whenever you special cast a Viscerous from your deck in defense position. You do not want it to stay in that for very long, so if you special cast it, it goes to your opponent's turn, pop this Altar, put it back into attack. You need to save that thing, otherwise it's going to die. Then next up, we have 2 copies of Dense Fog and 1 Tsunami. The Dense Fog is basically just so you can get in order to hit it with a Boom Bat or something like that. Sometimes, you can't target specific Elestrals because of abilities they have, but Dense Fog doesn't necessarily target it, so it's not targeting. It'll get around that suppression. At least I believe that's how that works. If it isn't, then I need to change the deck, but I'm pretty sure as long as it doesn't say target, it doesn't consider it as a target, and it's an overwhelming board state kind of thing. So in this instance, maybe there's like a Majesty that can't be targeted by something. You can Dense Fog it to get rid of its ability that it can't be targeted, and then blow it up with a Boom Bat, so on and so forth. I use that as an example because that literally happened at my locals. Also, I apologize if the camera's shaking. Somebody's walking upstairs. But with that being said, so Dense Fog is really just to get into those super situational based things, blow up an opponent Elestral, and move on. The Tsunami is to buy you time. If you're in a pinch and they're about to swing and take out a Viscerous or about to do whatever and do detrimental spirit damage, you can counter it by switching all of their stuff into defense, and it shuts down their attack for that turn, and then you get to go. That being said, let's go ahead and move into spirits. All right, so let's talk about spirits really quick, very, very succinctly. We have 12 copies of Teratlus, 4 copies of Zaptor, 2 of Leviathan, and 2 Owloon. The Leviathan and the Owloon are just splashes so that you can use Dense Fog and Tsunami. Zaptor is so you can get out your Astrabbit, your Boom Bat, so on and so forth. And then the Teratlus is for the rest of the deck. It's an Earth Nexus deck. You need the Teratlus. So that'll cover that. Let's go ahead and have a brief discussion on sideboarding. All right, let's go ahead and talk sideboard very, very briefly. I'm not even going to show it to you guys. Essentially, the sideboard for this deck is just a 1-of copy of anything that wasn't run in 3s. So extra Demeter, extra Shield, extra Elichick, extra Boom Bat, extra Mudlid, extra Molestation, extra Demeter if you want. And then on top of that, I run 3 copies of Apyro, 3 copies of Eruption in case I need to pivot it in. I haven't found the need for it yet, but it's there just in case. And then the remaining 1 would go to Lavalith if I had it. But I don't. So I'm not sure exactly if that's 15, but essentially it's just 1 of every other card that isn't run in 3s. the 3 copies of Eruption, 3 copies of Pyro, and the 1 Lavalith if I had it. If you have it, run it. If you don't, it's really nice if you have it. Don't get me wrong. Put it in there, but I don't have a copy. So I got to make do with what I got. So what is that? Let's do 3 copies of Eruption, 3 copies of a Pyro. That's at 6. Then you've got Mudlet, Mostation. You've got an Elichick. You've got a Boombat. Then you've got a Shield. You've got a Demeter. You've got a Dense Fog. You got a Tsunami. And then Lavalith. So there's your sideboard. There's your 15 card sideboard. And that's pretty much it. I don't really know if there's anything else to talk about here. If you guys have any other suggestions on other videos to make, if you guys want to see different Elestrals content or different TCG content in general, I'll be covering most things over here. I play a lot of Magic and do all that kind of stuff as well. So if you guys want to see more, just let me know down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you did, subscribe if you're new, comment down below if there's anything that you want me to change about the deck, anything that you would recommend. With that being said, I'm going to get up out. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.